Success can be serendipitous. If a young Jackie Earle Haley hadn't taken a young Johnny Depp to his audition for A Nightmare on Elm Street, Depp's film career may have never started and he wouldn't be a household name today. And one popular theory has it that if Steven Spielberg's E.T. had been delayed a couple of months, audiences wouldn't have found John Carpenter's very grim The Thing so jarring in terms of their expectations of what they were going to get from an Alien movie. And it would have been the blockbuster success that it very much deserved to be rather than a belatedly appreciated cult favourite. And very relevant to our purposes today, if a young Texan called David Cook hadn't been following livestock tagging innovations, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. That's going to make sense later. But success isn't all down to serendipity, of course. There are some very key decisions that mean Blockbuster became industry leader and ruled over home video rental for about 25 years. We're going to cover those today. However, I recognise corporate strategy, it risks being punishingly tediously dull, and Zoomers have deep-fried attention spans, and so I'm playing a very dangerous game with the YouTube's crucial audience retention statistics. So I figured jazz it up a little bit. We're going to play some corporate strategy Jenga right now. What do you reckon? We're just going to go through some key decisions and until disaster strikes, and then we'll call it a day. Yeah? So, getting straight into it. Why did David and Sandy Cook's Blockbuster become king? Why am I talking to you now about Blockbuster and not Movies to Go or Hollywood Video? Let's try you. Nice. So last shift I was talking about how most video rental stores were small, independent and entrepreneurial, and in the early to mid 80s they would have film collections of maybe 200 to 400 VHS tapes. That's what they were offering the customers. When Blockbuster comes in, it offers 8,000 titles. And it could do this because David Cook was not a beginner. He was not a small-scale entrepreneur. He was an established businessman. He was previously working in the oil industry, providing very specialist software. And that was great. That was very profitable. Until geopolitical machinations basically caused havoc in the oil industry, and his business then went under. So he sold up, and he then had an established capital base from which to make Blockbuster a success. He was able to invest $640,000 in the first video collection for the very first Blockbuster, which he set up in Dallas, Texas in October 1985. And I'll mention at this point, because it kind of cracked me up, that David's wife at the time, Sandy Cook, very sadly, she had the thankless task of having to individually go through all the film studio catalogues and select those films for that initial Blockbuster collection, all 8,000 of them.
I've never seen 10,000 tapes in one store.
There's so much kid stuff.
And I can keep them for 3 evenings.
It's a daunting prospect. Poor sod. Anyway, so how does this make Blockbuster a massive success? It might sound a bit obvious, but let's maybe formalize it. This is, in effect, in the broader sense, a long-tail strategy, which is something absolutely crucial to big business. Amazon absolutely relies on it. Now, most normal businesses, they try and specialize. They try and have a focus. So if you're the tennis store, you want people to come for you whenever they have tennis needs, rackets, balls, whatever. If you are a tea merchant, that chai guy, you want people to come to you for teapots, loose leaf, whatever. You want people, if they're looking for tea bags, to go for TCG. That's what you want. Now, in contrast, with a long-tail strategy, you specialize in everything, as oxymoronic as that sounds. To sound less mental, with a long-tail strategy, you try and have a very wide range of products you offer, even if you actually stock a very low number of those individual products, and you can get away with it because those niche items will probably only sell a few. So you don't need to have a huge number of them. But people looking for that very specific thing while they're there will probably want other things. This strategy works because you're trying to maximize your appeal. You're trying to maximize the customer base you can reach. You want people who are looking for the tennis accessories. You want people looking to stock up on teapots, candles, whatever. the more obscure things you have, the easier it is to draw people in. Maybe you can buy noisy motorbikes, I don't know. But whatever people are looking for, they will start to come for you because they know you as a place that has everything. Now, I'm of course using this in a very narrow sense here. Sorry, a very wide sense, because Blockbuster really in the early days was only offering video rental. Now they would later, less successfully, they would really expand that and try and go proper long tail and try and flog you CDs and candles. But that is a story for much later. In the early days, they were only doing videos, but they had that incredibly wide range, 8,000 titles compared to about 300. And so why would you go to a small independent store and they probably won't have what you might find something you like, but you go to Blockbuster, they will almost certainly have it. And so that is a long tail strategy in effect. That is a big draw. And that initial brave, risky, massive investment in 8,000 titles for their very first store is a key to Blockbuster's success. Now, let's look for the next one. Neato. This might sound trivial, but is absolutely crucial to the success of Blockbuster. Very early on, David and Sandy Cook decided that Blockbuster would choose to be family friendly, bright, open, and welcoming. Now, the competition, the independent video rental stores, they were maybe unintentionally different. As we said, they are crammed into small store spaces, which is really all they need for their collections. And that gives it a sort of, they may want to say cozy, but I think we can fairly say cramped and crammed, and often kind of dark feel. And because they were often pitching themselves to the adult audience, they were very happy to be very pragmatic and also to stock adult material, pornography. And that would be sometimes under the counter, or it would be in a room in the back with a sort of curtain separating it off, but you knew what was there. And, that attracted a certain clientele. It was very profitable. You could get extreme material there that you couldn't get on TV or in any regular cinema. You could get it in the slightly less dodgy, slightly less stabby local video store. But it doesn't exactly create a family-friendly ambiance. My independent video rental store back in the day that I was a member of, that, as fond as I am of it, it 100% had that vibe. It was a little bit seedy. It had a great horror collection though. That's the only place I could find Child's Play. The other competition, the video franchises that had got the head start on Blockbuster and had already got a whole bunch of stores together, they had the cash revenue to get bigger premises. They didn't have that cramped feel, but in terms of their image, well, let's look at a few of their logos. So Family Video there, it's okay. It's maybe a bit plain, but it doesn't stand out, does it? Hollywood Video, that is a bit more distinctive, but it's dark, it's sparse, it's maybe even a little bit amateurish in some of the illustration. And Dan Snyder's Video Playground, that is just a foot and a boner. None of these radiate family friendliness or welcoming atmospheres. Whereas, well, now let's look at Blockbuster's card. Very nice, impressive. Look at that bold primary colouring, the tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God, it's even been laminated. That clean, crisp design is down to Sandy Cook, David Cook's ex-wife. In what it would inevitably be given the girl boss treatment in a movie retelling of the Blockbuster story, Sandy designed the bold, contrasting and crisp design of the Blockbuster logo in the ticket, that famous iconic design. And you'll recall she also researched and selected the initial catalogue of 8,000 titles to fill the first Blockbuster shelves. And to top it all off, she also chose the name Blockbuster. You can really see that inspirational modern movie, can't you? I certainly can. Anyway, from going around other video rental stores when doing research and preparing for Blockbuster, Sandy decided that she was going to make Blockbuster not only bigger, but brighter and really open. The stores were really distinctive for their very bright, welcoming colour palette and the very distinctive front-facing, top to bottom, floor to ceiling windows. That was a genius stroke in an era when so many of the stores are kind of seedy, kind of dingy, you're not sure what's behind the door, you're not sure how much of it is adult material, if you really want to go in there, if it's dodgy. Blockbuster was an absolute open door, just the windows let you know exactly what you'd get in there. You saw how bright and welcoming and clean it was. It looked professional and it looked welcoming. And also, it was a huge advert. Those windows were letting anyone passing by see a bigger range of videos than they'd get anywhere else. They saw the huge selection and you naturally start wondering what you can get there. Those factors made it a great decision and a huge contribution to the success of Blockbuster. Still within the slightly daft category of vibes is a decision that is key to Blockbuster being family friendly, popular and successful. And it's going to annoy the heck out of a bunch of you. I know loads of you are going to be annoyed with this, but stick with me. Early on, Blockbuster made a policy decision that they were not going to stock X-rated movies. Now I know that's going to cause some confusion. There's going to be bamboozlement, especially cross-cultural confusion, so we'll clear it up here. Neither America nor Britain have an X certificate anymore. Nothing is X-rated here anymore. But even when we did, the X certificate meant very different things in the different countries. So in America, the X certificate was really extreme. You know, you could get serious artistic fare that was pushing the boundaries, getting an X certificate, you know, A Clockwork Orange, Last Tango in Paris, or Midnight Cowboy. But really, mostly you were talking about very schlocky violent gore or straight up porn. That is typically what you would get, whereas in Britain, we just would not allow it. A really good illustration of that is The Evil Dead. In America, it had an X certificate. In Britain, it was banned, and we created a law to specifically try and clamp down on the sale of it and films like it. That is a very deep rabbit hole which we won't go into now. I should also point out that, to be fair, to make it sound like, to stop Blockbuster sounding particularly puritanical here, that a lot of cinemas also had policy of not screening X-rated movies, so it's not like it was unprecedented or, you know, particularly radical a decision. Now, just to sum up, to avoid the confusion, just so we're on the same page, for Brits, when you hear X certificate, you've got to think something far more extreme than anything we were showing at the time. And for Americans, Britain is an island just west of France. It used to be a real country once upon a time. Now that policy, interesting as it is, as damaging as it was to some of the sales, oddly enough, when Blockbuster had its first corporate takeover, that actually intensified. They got more conservative. Now, how weird does that sound in 2023? A megacorp gets involved, takes over your business, and it becomes more conservative. That just sounds wild to me now, but it's true. Blockbuster would amend this policy and expand it so that they would review specific R-rated titles as well if they were likely to cause controversy. Now, that saved them probably a lot of dodgy press, a lot of potentially scandalous press coverage if they'd held a whatever the hot button movie of the moment was. They managed to dodge that. And because of this, Blockbuster was known as a family-friendly venue. You could go into their massive stores, you could walk through their aisles, you could let your children wander, and you wouldn't have to worry about what they would encounter. There wasn't going to be anything extremely scurrilous in amongst the aisles at Blockbuster, and that helped reassure parents. Remember, VCR ownership was massively, significantly increased among families with children. Maybe I should say households with children. That was a long bit though. I think it was relatively coherent. Next bit. Please do forgive this minor filthy tangent, but I absolutely have to tell you about the sandwich effect. I came across it in the research and I knew I was going to talk about it, no matter how much I had to crowbar it in, but it's actually relevant here. So Blockbuster decides it's not going to sell any adult material, any blue movies. They're going to skip that. And that was in contravention to typical video rental wisdom, because adult material porn was particularly profitable. Not just because there is a dedicated and disgraceful market for that, but because of the sandwich effect. That is, your thirsty but suitably ashamed customers looking for some smut to coom to would sandwich it between two respectable movies. Or maybe it was this way round. Maybe it was that way round. I really hope it was, actually. Gosh, quite disturbing. But this practice of sort of camouflaging your more unsociable purchases with extraneous ones, it does have some precedent.
I'm told by a friend that you have some views for sale.
What sort of views, sir?
Hmm? What?
This sort, sir? Oh, your papers, sir.
Papers?
Times and Telegraph.
Oh, yes, of course. Silly of me. Thank you very much, sir.
And nevertheless, Blockbuster passed on the profane but very profitable genre of porn, and they flourished sans sandwich. They were able to totally capture the family market with that decision. It was a major step in them becoming the industry leaders and the most successful. And they probably dodged quite a few scandals when you think about it. Very canny, very canny. Next. Okay, very cynically, I hope those bawdy jokes perch your attention spans up, because this section has the potential to be drier than a German martini. The next thing we need to talk about is the early decision to invest $3 million in a distribution center. A distribution center with centrally located logistic. I know you're clicking off. I know you're clicking off the video. I can hear you do it. Damn your TikTokified attention spans. This is important. The distribution center was an early on innovation that enabled Blockbuster to ship out everything you needed to start a store from the ground up. It's basically like the GEC from Fallout 2, but for video rental. And this meant that when a franchisee signed up to make their own Blockbuster franchise store, or David Cook acquired a new location of his own to make an official Blockbuster-owned store, they could go to the distribution center and get absolutely everything they needed to them shipped to them in one go. It even had the toilet paper for the staff bathroom. That's how comprehensive and prepared they were. And this enabled rapid expansion for Blockbuster. In 1988, new Blockbuster stores were opening every 17 hours, and that is only possible with the distribution center. It's basically the same advantage that Richard Rummelt talks about in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy for Walmart. Their ability to think in terms of a network. This is the advantage that Blockbuster deployed very early on. And it's also the kind of forward-thinking, logistically minded expansionist strategy that caught the attention of Wayne Huizinga. Wayne Huizinga is the man behind the first corporate takeover of Blockbuster. He saw this distribution center as a sign of Blockbuster being ready to expand and enter the big leagues, that they already saw the big picture in a way the competition didn't. The distribution center enabled rapid expansion. Rapid expansion gave territorial control, and it built a network. And territorial control increased the brand presence in the market. That is, more people recognized that distinctive blue and yellow logo and style, the stronger that brand became. The stronger that brand and its presence became, the more people defaulted to choosing it because of the availability heuristic. This is the phenomenon that Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman have written about. That is, when you're making a decision, you're building a neural chain to make it. Once you've made it once, it is more convenient, less energy intensive for your brain to make that decision again versus taking a new decision path. Ergo, when you've made a choice once, you'll probably choose the same thing again. When you see a Blockbuster and associate that with video rental, that's going to be the one you go for when you feel like renting a video that night. Or even when you just pass it. The sight of Blockbuster makes you think, yeah, I'm going to make it a Blockbuster night tonight.
When your day needs a little turnaround, Blockbuster has 9,000 ways to make it a Blockbuster night.
How about another story?
Yeah, I got one with boys kissing girls.
Every kind of takeout has its own box. Chinese pizza, fun. Nobody has more fun than Blockbuster, so if you want great takeout without the calories, make it a Blockbuster night.
Give. Oh, plus they have all kinds of video games for the kids. So take care of everybody on your list. Make it a Blockbuster holiday.
In short, the more you recognise Blockbuster, the likelier you are to go for Blockbuster instead of another store. It is really the power of branding. The quality of Blockbuster stores is important, of course, but the power of the brand is absolutely pivotal, and the distribution centre was a key factor in that brand gaining power. This is why I risk boring you all senseless, okay? Sandy Cook's faultless aesthetic choices are fantastic, and they would make Blockbuster a lovely video store. But it is a somewhat boring logistical advantage conferred by a distribution centre that enabled Blockbuster to expand rapidly, build a network, and gain territorial control. And territorial control is what made Blockbuster a success over all the competition. I hope that was worth that. Okay, tagging. I knew we'd get to this eventually. So when David Cook had to move out of oil software, he was looking at other areas he could focus on, and he saw tech that was intended for the monitoring and tracking of livestock. Basically an RFID that you could give to cattle or whatever. Now, he thought that it could be used innovatively elsewhere, say for instance, in monitoring the comings and goings of your video rental collection. So he invested heavily in this, and in Blockbuster, all the videos were tagged, and he wrote a custom software set that could do all the monitoring for this. He had that expertise, of course. This has a huge impact. Because of this tagging, because of this software, this use of data, Blockbuster then knows exactly what's popular, what's being rented out, when it's being rented out, and very crucially, when it's being returned. And that means they have a great informational advantage on all the competition. They are able to find out what's popular, what they should invest in, and communicate this to all the other stores so that they can optimize their selection for customers and provide the best experience. That investment gives a huge advantage. Now, I should point out there that there is some controversy about this. In my research, my two sources disagree quite a lot, looking at these two wonderful tomes. Now, Gail DeGeorge, in writing a profile of Wayne Heisinger, who would be the corporate guy taking over from David Cook, she is obviously a lot more flattering and a lot more sympathetic, and she will acknowledge that there was a hesitance to do further investment in technology and upgrading the tracking and software systems. She will give that, but she will point out that later on, while Blockbuster was still being extremely successful, they did invest a very significant amount in the software. However, franchise owner Alan Payne is a lot more critical. He says that effectively Blockbuster not only never really invested sufficiently in its software systems to keep them maintained, keep them up to date, but that they never really made any sufficient use of the data that they had. It was extreme underutilization that cost them. Now, to be extra fair, I've pointed out the bias here. The bias for Alan Payne is that he was a franchise owner writing after the fact, who is very much interested in vindicating his own business acumen. That's where he's coming from. It's I'm trying not to make this critical, I'm trying to be objective. Additionally, Payne as a franchise owner has a different set of needs and priorities to the CEO, and therefore you can see why they might come to different decisions given that they have different priorities. So basically I'm saying you can make your own mind up, but we won't go any further on that because there's something we could very easily overlook that I want to focus on. And that is a small difference, but it's the matter of, in Blockbuster, you were able to have the tapes on the shelves. You might think, so what? Who cares about that? What difference does that make? Well, at the time, in all the other stores, the tapes weren't on the shelves. You would have your empty cassette box, and that would know what's in the selection, but you would have to then take it and go up to the reception and ask for the film and see if they had it. You didn't know until you asked. And if they did have it, if you were in luck, well, they would then get it for you, go in the back room, they'd have to find it in the stacks, and then bring it to you. They would then write it down on their leisure ledger, it would all be in card, and then take your payment and then you go. That is a lot of uncertainty and delay introduced into the customer experience. Because of tagging, Blockbuster didn't need to do this. Now, they did make a risky decision to trust the customers by just leaving the tapes, which as we know are very expensive, out there, but they took that gamble and it paid off. Customers also had an information advantage in Blockbuster. They could see what was available, they just take it off the shelf, they take it to the reception, say they want that movie, there is no doubt whether it's available or not, and then instead of having to go in the back room and look for it, all they would do on reception is swipe it. The tagging software does all the rest, tracks it, they take your payment, you're good to go. It is a much more efficient, much more pleasant customer experience. And given that video rental was an industry with very high volumes of traffic concentrated in particular periods, Friday nights, Saturday nights, given that, you really needed to be as efficient as possible to provide a better customer experience, because otherwise there are a lot of video stores around. They could go elsewhere. But because Blockbuster has that great selection, has that great customer experience, it's more incentive to keep going to Blockbuster. And that is why tagging is absolutely crucial. Oh, okay. God, I'm nervous on this one. Right. Number 5. I've been pretty optimistic, haven't I? I mean, we're still on the upswing, we're still on the meteoric rise of Blockbuster, but I do have to introduce something of a cynical note at this point. I have to talk about 1986 and the first major turn in Blockbuster's journey. And that is the moment that Blockbuster stopped being David Cook's company and became part of big business. So Blockbuster under the Cooks had spent $3 million on the distribution center and expanded to 19 stores. That's 1986. Their revenue was very healthy and their debt was low, but expanding had drained the coffers. Cook needed more funds to keep growing, so to get that liquidity of funds, he made a stock offering in 1986. He aimed to raise $18 million this way, but a major Wall Street publication, Barron's, published an article in September that derided Blockbuster and its chances. And partly as a result of this, the stock offering only brought in $4 million. This is where I go a little tinfoil, a little conspiratorial and differ from my own research, but bear with me. Now, David Cook, successful businessman, but he's not a Wall Street insider. He doesn't have any Wall Street clout. And so when he's looking for that initial stock offering, a Wall Street publication rubbishes Blockbuster and scuppers the stock offering. So David Cook is then desperate. And then Wayne Heisinger, a Wall Street insider, comes in to approach him from a position of strength and is able to effectively get control over this up and coming company at a massive discount, really bolstering his position. Cook is desperate, so he has to accept. And then Wall Street is suddenly really happy that Blockbuster is in the hands of, safe pair of hands, a Wall Street insider. Now, is that conspiratorial thinking that that publication may have been sort of influenced? I don't know. It could be conspiratorial. I could be paranoid. I don't know. But is it impossible that Wall Street would work that way? I don't think so. But anyway. So Blockbuster is taken over by Wayne Heisinger and his business associates on February 13th, 1987. That patronage, that access to the big players, the journos and the lines of credit are what supercharged Blockbuster's expansion. In 1986, they had 19 stores. In 1987, there were 133. And in 1988, they had 430 and stonking corporate debt. Blockbuster would have still swiftly grown under Cook, but it would have grown slower, and rivals would have had time to adopt Blockbuster's best practice. Heisinger knew to aim for growth as quickly as possible to gain the advantage and stop competitors growing. And by planting a Blockbuster in the right territory, selected by a specialist, competitors would die or be unable to compete. multimillionaire Felix Dennis wrote that you do not need to be original to be successful. You can take someone else's original business idea and then just use your wealth and existing business network to do their idea bigger and better and outcompete them that way. That's exactly what Felix Dennis did with his Maxim magazine, which was a rip-off of Loaded. Brits are having a massive nostalgia right now. Anyway, he used that technique and he succeeded in that. He outcompeted the original. Now, what I'm thinking of in this scenario is that, somewhat cynically, if David and Sandy Cook had turned down Wayne Huizinga's offer and just stuck it out, then they could have continued to grow Blockbuster. They would have still been growing at an impressive rate. But I do think with my research that basically Wayne Huizinga could very likely have then just called up Hollywood Video or Movies to Go, and then they would be the king, and we might be talking about them now. It's a slightly depressing thought, but that shows you the power of patronage and why patronage was so important to the success of Blockbuster once they had already made those brilliant decisions and used that serendipity to get successful in the start. It took them to a certain level, but you needed patronage to go even further. Now the next thing I think is okay, well, that will do it for tonight, folks. I think that'll cover us. We'll probably leave it there. I think you now have a fairly in-depth understanding of the decisions Blockbuster made to become so successful. I mean, it's pretty prodigious, going from one store to 430 in 3 years. That's good going. They must have been doing something right. What an achievement. Oh, yeah, don't worry about that. That's probably nothing. Keep it optimistic. We've learned a lot today, and right now I feel like just relaxing, maybe putting on a movie and just talking all the way through it. I hear that's very popular with the kids these days, so we're going to give that a go. And next time, we'll talk about more Blockbuster business practices, what they decided to do once they were king. But I'll leave it for now. Cheers.
Can rent all kinds of mysteries. Uncle Charlie can choose his own adventures, and I can have a wonderful life. Blockbuster Video. Give the gift of entertainment.